Hey everyone, my name is Teresa, and for my speech, Trigger Warnings and Safe Spaces, Essentials of College or Unnecessary Security Blanket, I will be talking about the existence of trigger warnings and safe spaces on college campuses. I want to begin this speech by explaining what trigger warnings and safe spaces are. So, a trigger warning is a statement made with the purpose of warning a viewer or listener that the topic that is about to be discussed is a very sensitive topic, such as sexual abuse or assault or anything like that. For example, in a classroom setting, a professor might warn their students that they are going to have a discussion about rape or something along those lines. Its purpose is to mentally prepare the students to discuss this topic, especially for those students who have had past traumatic experiences associated with that topic. A safe space is a distinguished area on a college campus that students can go to talk about their past life experiences, their goals, their opinions. It's meant to be a specific place on the college campus that students can go to for support during their college career. In past years, the existence of trigger warnings and safe spaces have sparked a nationwide debate on whether or not the existence of them are harmful to students or beneficial to students. Some scholars believe that the existence of trigger warnings and safe spaces are very beneficial to students because it helps to support their mental health. Other scholars argue that the existence of trigger warnings and safe spaces are actually harming the students because it's preventing debates from occurring in the college classroom. College is known for being an environment that supports the notion of free speech and different opinions. So these scholars are scared that the existence of trigger warnings in safe spaces are preventing debates. This debate was sparked by a letter that was sent out by John Ellison, who is the Dean of Students at the University of Chicago. He sent out a letter to all of the incoming freshmen that stated, "Our commitment to academic freedom means that we do not support so-called trigger warnings. We do not cancel invited speakers because their topics might prove controversial. And we do not condone the creation of intellectual safe spaces where individuals can retreat from ideas and perspectives that are at odds with their own." This letter sparked the debate on whether or not trigger warnings and safe spaces are beneficial for college students or not. In order to truly understand this debate, it's important to evaluate each side of the argument to understand where each perspective is coming from. I found an article that supported the existence of trigger warnings in safe spaces, and I thought that it was interesting to note that this article was written by a college student named Sophie Downs. Sophie was a college student at the University of Chicago. She was an upperclassman, so she did not receive the letter that John Ellison sent out to the incoming freshmen, but she did read the letter and she completely disagreed with his stance on the issue. Sophie talked about how she was in a class at the University of Chicago that focused on topics such as gender, sexual violence, child abuse, and disability. She said that her professor would consistently send out emails reminding the students that she was there to help them get through the class and to focus on these sensitive topics. She also put a note in her syllabus and would remind them of this each class. Sophie saw this as a positive attribute to the format of the class. In other words, she thought that the trigger warnings were helpful to the students because it allowed them to mentally prepare to talk about sensitive and traumatic topics while also allowing them to discuss it in an environment that was conducive to learning. Considering that college students are the ones who are affected by the existence of trigger warnings in safe spaces, I thought it was important to understand the opinions of college students on this issue. Sophie clearly supports the existence of trigger warnings and safe spaces on college campuses, but she's not the only one. I also found a video that shows students who support the existence of safe spaces on their college campuses.
First time I saw the Women's Center on Locust, I never thought it was something that I personally would like take advantage of. It's something that I just used to pass by when I was like going to class. I think it's important that women of color on this campus feel like they have a space and a resource that they can go to and just talk about whatever they want, things that maybe the rest of the student body might not be talking about. My safe space at Penn is the Women's Center.
While it is clear why college students support the existence of trigger warnings in safe spaces, it's also important to understand why certain administrators and scholars think that trigger warnings in safe spaces actually cause more harm than good. Some administrators and scholars believe that the existence of trigger warnings and the creation of safe spaces are more harmful because it's inhibiting the students' growth. In other words, they are not going to learn how to deal with these sensitive topics and respond to these issues without a warning. While providing a warning isn't necessarily a bad thing, sometimes things can get taken to the extreme. For example, there have been multiple instances where college students have refused to listen to guest speakers on campus because the views and opinions of the guest speaker differ from the views of the students. Also, by creating safe spaces, individuals are only being exposed to other people who agree with their ideas and opinions. In other words, this generation isn't learning how to properly debate and have civilized conversations with other people who have different opinions. Safe spaces are actually causing college students to be more divided than ever before. I found a video that showcases the extremes that some of these trigger warnings in safe spaces have been taken to, and how it's affecting the youth of America.
Students at a public university in Texas are petitioning against their own governor, Greg Abbott, as their graduation speaker because they say, well, he's just not diverse enough and, quote, does not align the spirit of the University of North Texas. In just the last week, two other colleges were at the center of controversy after students protested a conservative author who had been invited to speak about sexual assault. Students complained that her mere presence was so offensive, they needed to post trigger warnings on campus so people could get prepared to deal with their upset.
Understanding both sides to this argument is vital to understand the debate that has erupted over the existence of trigger warnings in safe spaces on college campuses. I personally believe that the existence of trigger warnings on college campuses can be beneficial when they are used in the proper way. When a trigger warning is provided to students on a college campus, it is beneficial because it helps them mentally prepare themselves to talk about very sensitive issues. It is definitely beneficial for students who have experienced traumatic past experiences associated with said topic, such as sexual assault or abuse. With that being said, college is meant to prepare a student to enter into the real world, and there are no trigger warnings in the real world. In other words, by providing trigger warnings on the college campuses, it's actually causing students to be less prepared to deal with these topics once they graduate, even though it may seem harmless and beneficial to them in that setting. I also do not agree with the existence of safe spaces on college campuses. Safe spaces do not only divide students, but it makes them less likely to ever encounter somebody who has different views or opinions on certain topics. In other words, the students will never learn how to properly have a conversation with someone who has views differing from their own. Also, there are no safe spaces created for people in the real world. There's always going to be somebody who has a different opinion or a different viewpoint on a particular topic, and I think that it's extremely important for college students to learn how to competently deal with these issues so that they are prepared when they graduate to enter into the professional working world.